This high-profile story shook the whole of Brazil and was widely covered by the international media. Hundreds of law enforcers, rescuers, and volunteers from among those who cared about the story were searching for the young couple who disappeared in the forests of Iguaçu province. They had hoped to find them alive, but unfortunately, those hopes were not realized. The last days of the young people turned into a real nightmare. But grief-stricken members of the families of the missing awaited another ordeal when the main criminal, rapist, torturer, and brutal killer was not punished. Moreover, he found himself in better conditions than he had lived before. Lyanna Friedenbach was born in São Paulo in May 1987. The girl was the eldest of two children in her family. She grew up in a fairly well-known and wealthy family. The head of the family, Enrique Friedenbach, was a successful lawyer and a very respected man in the city. Felipe Silva Café was also a native of São Paulo, born in July 1984. However, he was brought up in a rather modest, large family. From childhood, he worked part-time, trying to provide for himself independently and help his relatives. The young people met as school children. Their friendship grew into mutual sympathy and then into their first youthful love, but they had to hide it in every possible way. Lyanna's parents were religious people who brought up their daughter strictly. She attended Sunday school from an early age and regularly went to church. Her father and mother were categorically against her having romantic relationships at such a young age. In addition, social inequality played a significant role. As mentioned, Lyanna was from a wealthy family, whereas her chosen one was poor. However, the prohibitions of her parents did not force the young people to part. Instead, they simply began to hide their affair, secretly arranging dates and places where no one could see them to spend at least a little time together. In the fall of 2003, the lovers decided to get away from everyone for a while by taking a trip to a remote, deserted area. They carefully prepared for the trip, which was to be an exciting adventure for them. Above all, they took care of a plausible alibi that would justify their absence and not arouse suspicion. Felipe told his parents that he and his friends were going on a camping trip. Lyanna, on the other hand, told her parents that she was going on a sightseeing trip with the guys from church. She knew this excuse would work and that her parents would let her go without question. The Friedenbach and Café families believed the stories made up by the teenagers and let their children go to their deaths without worrying about anything. Lyanna and Felipe were unspeakably happy. They could enjoy each other's company for a whole week without fear of prohibitions and censure from their parents. The young couple decided to go to a picturesque province called Iguaçu. They took with them a tent, sleeping bags, some personal belongings, and a small stock of provisions. However, they had practically no money, which caused some difficulties. As students, they had the right to free public transportation, so they planned their route in advance to get to their destination by bus. Early in the morning of October 31st, the lovers met at the agreed place, making sure that no one who knew them saw them together. They took the first bus, and after reaching another city in the late evening, spent the night at the bus station. 2 more transports took them to their desired location. From there, they had to walk a few kilometers to a deserted place hidden in the woods where they planned to camp and spend a few days alone together. The day was warm and sunny. Despite their fatigue after the long journey, the young couple was in good spirits, joking, laughing, and making plans for their little vacation. When they reached the place marked on the map, they began to set up their modest but cozy camp. When Lyanna and Felipe traveled to such a remote and secluded place, they did not take into account that in those areas, poverty reigned and crime thrived. Their appearance, well-dressed young people with large backpacks and bags, did not go unnoticed. As the couple walked through the forest to the abandoned farm where they planned to stay, they caught the eye of local bandits fishing near a pond. They were Paulo Cesar da Silva Marques, nicknamed Pernambuco, and Roberto Alves Cardoso, known as Chino. The latter was only 16 years old but was already the leader of the gang. He organized the criminals who were interested in strangers, especially young, beautiful girls. In addition, they believed that the travelers had something valuable in their backpacks and could be robbed. The bandits stealthily followed the couple and began to watch, lurking in the thickets. The lovers set up a tent, had a snack, and then began to arrange their campsite. The intruders sat in ambush until they were sure that no one else would join the young couple and that they had no weapons. Pernambuco and Chino then attacked Lyanna and Felipe, threatening them. The frightened couple did not even try to run away or fight back against their unknown assailants. After searching all the bags and backpacks, the criminals found nothing of interest. Then they decided they could demand ransom for the boy and the girl from their families. Lyanna, scared to death, immediately confirmed that she was from a rich family and that her father would give them as much money as they asked for. The criminals were happy about this turn of events, but since they had no experience in such matters, they did not know how to organize everything to stay free and with the money. While the plan was maturing and the bandits were trying to figure out who they had in their hands and how much they could ask for their lives, they decided to hide the prisoners so they could not escape. Initially, they were taken to a dilapidated structure near the very farm where the boys had been staying. However, since there were no windows or doors, the criminals soon decided to bring the pair to the home of one of the gang members. There, Felipe was tied up and severely beaten to ensure he could not escape or resist. That same night, all the gang members took turns assaulting the bound and helpless girl, finally breaking her mentally. The criminals could not figure out how to demand and collect the ransom, so they simply decided to get rid of the captives and hide their bodies somewhere in the woods so they would never be found. After torturing the victims the next day, they took them to a deserted place in the woods. The half-dead Felipe was taken deep into the forest by Panuku. A gunshot was heard, and then the bandit returned alone. Lyanna realized what had happened and that her beloved was no longer alive. Although the kidnappers tried to assure her that they had released him, they had other plans for the beautiful young girl. The scoundrels wanted to keep her as a plaything until they got bored of her, especially since no one had started looking for the missing couple at that time. A couple of days after their daughter's departure, Lyanna's parents found out that there was no excursion trip with the church group. Her friends also had no idea where she had gone. The Friedenbach family suspected that their daughter had run off with her boyfriend and immediately contacted his parents to find out where their children might be. However, Felipe's family was certain their son had gone camping with his friends, so they had no information to help locate the couple. The situation became more concerning when neither of the young people had been in touch for several days, and their phones remained turned off. Thanks to his connections and financial resources, Henry Friedenbach mobilized the entire police force in the city. Step by step, bit by bit, they managed to reconstruct the route the couple had taken after running away from home. By trickery, the police soon reached Embu-Guasu, where the couple had gotten off their last bus before heading into a deserted wooded area. It was also in that location where their phones were last active. A large-scale search operation began, involving police officers, rescuers, and concerned citizens who wanted to help. A prominent local businessman joined the effort, providing his personal helicopter to search from the air and distributing flyers with photos of the missing couple. Their camp was found quickly, and it looked disturbing. Despite the lack of signs of blood or struggle, it was evident that something terrible had happened. Their personal belongings had been emptied from their bags and carelessly scattered. The tent had been slashed from top to bottom with a knife, and the couple's cell phones were lying around. As search teams scoured every mile, rescuers soon discovered Felipe's lifeless body. The young man had been tied up and shot in the back of the head at almost point-blank range, leaving him with no chance of survival. It became clear that the probability of finding Lyanna alive was minimal, but hope, as they say, dies last. Henry Friedenbach involved the press in the search, ensuring that the investigation was widely covered in the media. He wanted as many people as possible to know about the case. A significant reward was announced for any information regarding Lyanna's whereabouts, but it did not immediately yield results. After the criminals disposed of Felipe, they brought Lyanna back to the house where they had previously held both victims. By then, the bandits had been joined by their accomplices, Antonio Gano da Silva and Agnaldo Pius. Chino proudly announced to them that Lyanna was his property and that he could do whatever he wanted with her. He invited everyone to fulfill their darkest fantasies with Lyanna, and his offer was immediately accepted. A day later, after learning about the large-scale search operation, the criminals decided to change their location and move with the victim to the house of Anthony Matias de Barros, another member of the gang. In the evening of the same day, they went fishing, taking Lyanna with them. The ringleader threw his jacket over her because it was chilly outside, showing concern in this way. Later that evening, the older brother of Chino, whom the juvenile delinquent had not told about his affairs, came to the same place. Chino told his brother that Lyanna was his lover, but he immediately recognized her as the wanted girl. He took his brother aside and said that his captive was being actively sought and that the police were literally following them. Chino took his brother's words as a sign and a call to action. He decided that it was urgent to get rid of Lyanna and then run away and lay low. He lied to Lyanna, saying that she was free and that he would lead her to the road. In fact, the bandit led his victim into the forest, where he brutally killed her with a knife and then smashed her head with a rock to ensure she was dead. Lyanna's body was not found until 5 days after the massacre. She was very badly mutilated. Lyanna was wearing the killer's jacket, which later became one of the key pieces of evidence. The criminals were incredibly cruel, cynical, and ruthless. But at the same time, they were stupid and short-sighted. They did not try to run or hide, nor did they bother to destroy the physical evidence. Yet they believed that no one would ever find them. This naive self-confidence helped the police quickly identify them and apprehend all members of the criminal gang. Chino, as I have already mentioned, left his jacket on the victim's body, which had his sweat marks on it. In addition, he brought the murder weapon to his house, washed it, and hid it in the yard. He also tried to wash the clothes with traces of Lyanna's blood so that he could continue to wear them. According to the results of DNA analysis, it was possible to identify the gang members who had committed violence against Lyanna. All the gang members were apprehended almost simultaneously. The ringleader not only did not deny his involvement, but immediately began to testify, boasting that it was he who had kidnapped, abused, and then killed the unfortunate victim. He described in detail everything that had happened to Lyanna in the last days of her life. Following a lengthy trial, almost all of the adult members of the criminal gang received fairly harsh sentences. Perambua was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Felipe Antonio Gano da Silva. Aga Lopez also received a life sentence. However, Anthony Matias de Barros was sentenced to only 6 years in prison because he himself did not torture the victim, but provided the gang with his house, where it all took place. However, with the ringleader and the most brutal member of the gang, the situation was more complex. At the time of his crimes, he was barely 16 years old. For this reason, he was sent to a specialized prison for minors with a fairly mild regime. Champo made several escape attempts and behaved aggressively and inadequately, which led to a psychiatric examination. He was found to have several mental abnormalities, which, although not dangerous individually, combined to create a monstrous result, turning him into a sophisticated sadist and murderer without feelings of pity or remorse. After such a diagnosis, the criminal was transferred to a closed-type medical institution, where he was to undergo compulsory treatment and rehabilitation. No further punishment was ever achieved for him despite numerous appeals filed by the families of the murdered young woman. As a result, Chino ended up in better conditions than he had been in before the crime. He now has his own private, cozy room with a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He receives balanced 4 meals a day with a customized menu, which is part of the policy of the medical facility where he is being held. His monthly maintenance is estimated at about 1,200 Rand, which is approximately $2,500. In recent years, the perpetrator has regularly petitioned for his release, noting that he has undergone a full course of treatment and no longer poses any threat to others, which means he can return to his normal life. This is a monstrous story,